దీంట్లో ఉంటుందా?
ఇవన్నీ టైప్ చేయ కాపీ పేస్ట్ చేయి.
Hello.
Hi, Janaya. We're just waiting for you.
I couldn't hear.
Hi, Janaya. I think it's because we're all on mute. Good evening. We're just waiting for Dr. Donti. And of course, we're waiting for 8 p.m. So
Okay.
we can start. The program, if you want to revisit it, is in the chat box.
Okay.
ఎక్కడికి పై
But am I audible?
దీపు
Yes.
Yes,
loud and
Chanaya,
clear.
we can hear you. Hello,
Oh, thank you.
Chanaya.
How are you?
Good.
టైప్ చేస్తుంటే కదా
Oh, you kind of look different, huh?
I look different.
నన్ను
Oh,
పెట్టని
yeah. That, yeah.
But it's good.
Yeah. This is the real face, as usual. I have come back.
That's the real Chanaya. Yeah.
It's not good. I have to stop because it will block all others, sounds. Yeah.
Steven, I think Dr. Sandeep Pandey is in the attendee. Can we promote him?
Oh, Dr. Sandeep has joined.
Yes,
He's already here.
yeah. He's in the attendee. So can we?
Yes.
Okay.
So we just need Dr. Donti.
Doc Dante is
Yeah, he has also come.
So I think we're
Yeah.
complete now. Bobby is translating for us, right? For English to Hindi.
Also, yeah. But technically, is it set? I'm not sure about that.
Yes. I will set you up right now. So for our attendees, if you want to hear the interpretation from English to Hindi, we are going to have the Hindi translation room. You can enter it at the bottom of your screen through the interpretation channel. If you're using your laptops, if you're using your phones, and the options, you can see the interpretation there. Just choose whether it's English or Hindi. Thank you.
GC, Commission 6 is peasants, is it?
Yes.
Peasants and workers.
Fishers and rural peoples.
Sorry, come again?
Peasants, fishers, and rural people.
Okay.
టెస్ట్ టైప్
పంపి
అక్కడ కాదు
JC? Oh, okay. We got the program. Thank you.
Sarah, we are now going live. You can start anytime.
ఇక్కడ మనం దీన్ని ఇప్పుడు వాట్సాప్లో పెట్టేసుకుంటే అయిపోతుంది ఎక్కడికి ఉండిపోతుంది ఇప్పుడు జస్ట్ చేంజ్ చేసి తీసి దాన్ని పంపు
సరే బ్యాక్ తీసి
అది ఉండని రా నేను మొదలు దీంట్లో ఇక్కడ పెట్టదు దీని మీద పెట్టి పెట్టిన ఇక్కడ నుంచి మనం కాపీ చేసుకుంటాం ఒకవేళ వేరే పెట్టండి.
కాపీ అట్లా ఒకసారి కాపీ చేస్తే ఇంకా ఉంటుంది పేజీ అంతా.
పోయినావా? ఎవరు తీసుకున్నారు?
We are now live on Facebook. Sarah, you can start now.
Okay, thank you very much, GC. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar that we are standing with the Indian farmers, and it's on neoliberalism and agriculture, a forum on India's tree farm laws. We have I'm Sarojini Rangam, and I'm the Vice Chair for Asia Pacific for the International League of People's Struggles. And ILPS is a global movement that seeks to coordinate anti-imperialist and democratic movements around the world. And it has partnerships in many countries all over the world, and it has study groups, and they're called commission. So this webinar is being organized by ILPS, but I'm also the executive director of Pan Asia Pacific, and we just want to provide solidarity to the Indian farmers in their struggle for liberation and democracy. And this webinar is part of the ILPS Month of Solidarity with the Indian people. And this webinar is organized by the Andhra Pradesh Vivasaya Union, or APVVU, the Institute for Motivating Self-Employment, IMSE, the Asian Peasants Coalition, APC, the People's Coalition on Food Sovereignty, or PCFS, Pan Asia Pacific, the International League of People's Struggles, that as I mentioned, and the ILPS Commission 6. Now, Commission 6 is focused on peasants, fishers, and rural people. And so this is really a way of sharing what's happening in India and, providing solidarity to the farmers who are still protesting. So the objectives of the forum is to expose the neoliberalization of agriculture in India through the Tree Farm Acts of 2020 under the Modi regime. It also aims to tackle the potential impacts of the specific laws to farmers, agriculture, and food sovereignty of the peoples of India. So, and to encourage solidarity for farmers in India and the protests happening in India. It's, one of the reasons why we call for the Solidarity Month with the Indian people was really the tremendous organizing and the protest that's going on, because it's not just the farmers, but workers and consumers, because everyone is going to be affected by these three laws. And I think, and we felt that it was very important to have the solidarity and the, more discussion, more understanding. What does this mean to the farmers, to the people in the rural areas, to the peasants of India? So I'm very happy to facilitate this and moderate this session. And I'm also happy to introduce our first speaker, Sylvia Malari of PCFS. She's the co-chair, and she's a good friend of mine. and we've been on working together for so long on the issues of peasant rights, food sovereignty, and the rights of people. So Sylvia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Saro. Warm greetings of solidarity to everyone, especially the farmers and people of India. The largest and most momentous strike in recent history, the farmers' protests in India, continue to inspire us that a better world is possible. In the eyes of the world, especially for us activists and food sovereignty advocates in the world, the farmers, women farmers, indigenous rural food producers in India are standing up, as they have been doing for the past century. They are standing up against the Three Farms Act, which would mean the death of peasant autonomy, state abandonment of farmers, and further loss of livelihood for producers. They corporate control of their agriculture. For the past half a century, large agricultural corporations have been gobbling up lands, subsidies, and even spaces that farmers deserve. India's rural food producers are also standing up for a just and equitable relations in food production. They reject further contractualization, landlessness, and destitution of farm workers' conditions. They are standing up for the needy, the landless, the poor, the hungry, and the oppressed in India. That every household in India can afford adequate, healthy, and culturally appropriate nourishment. They are standing up for land, life, and human dignity. Ultimately, in our eyes, they are standing up for a better world, a world where just, equitable, and sustainable food systems thrive, where farmers and rural food producers are at the front and center of food and agriculture systems, where people, not corporate profit, matters. We stand with them. Let us show the world that we, the rural food producers in the global south, stand shoulder to shoulder in fighting for our rights, for our life, and the planet. Stand Delhi Chalco. Stand with farmers. Repeal the Three Farms Acts. Down. Very much.
Thank you, Sylvia. Down with imperialism. Thank you. And down with corporatization of agriculture. So thank you for the, starting point of our discussion with a strong message. Thank you for that. Our next speaker is Professor Duvuru Narasimha Reddy, and he will give the context and the framework for our discussion. He's actually a professor of economics and former dean of the School of Social Sciences, University of Hyderabad. He has written many books and research papers and articles on farmers' indebtedness, agricultural economy, labor and globalization, challenges of higher education, and so on. And I know him for his work on child labor also. So it's wonderful to finally meet you, Professor. So Professor will discuss the Three Farm Acts and the neoliberalization of Indian agriculture. Please go ahead.
You need to unmute, sir. There's something wrong. You are on mute, sir. Unmute.
JC, can you help?
Yeah.
Hello. Doctor.
He's an unmute. Unmute. Sir, unmute, sir.
Dr. Dovuru is unmuted. However, we cannot hear him. Maybe you can try to reconnect your audio for the meantime.
Oh.
Okay, given that Prof is having problems with the internet, maybe I'm going to move on to the next speaker, and we will come back to you. Hopefully, we can resolve.
Here, mute, sir. Yeah.
Yeah, he will. Yes. Okay. So we'll come back to you, Prof. But we will now move on to the next speaker. We have a long list of speakers, and so we want to move on. So we have now Dr. Sandeep Pandey, Ramon Magsaysay awardee, and he will now go to the first of the controversial farm laws and how it affects small food producers. The Farmers Produce Trade and Commerce Act and the issues surrounding the minimum support price will be discussed by you. And Dr. Pandey is a renowned activist, farmer advocate, and he has also published many work on social advocacy and struggles in India. He's also the vice president of the Socialist Party of India. So, Dr. Sandeep Pandey, please go ahead.
Thank you, Sarojini. Could you just let me know how much time I have to make my presentation? Should I take 10 to 15 minutes or how much?
Yes, sorry. Yes, you have 15 minutes.
Okay, great. The first of the three acts that are at the center of controversy is called the Farmers Produce and Trade. Farmers Produce Trade and Commerce Promotion and Facilitation Act 2020. And, this is one of the three controversial acts against which farmers are protesting around Delhi, mostly in North India, Punjab, Haryana, and Western Uttar Pradesh. But now the movement has spread to the entire country. And I'm very happy that today we have organized this international forum, especially people from Asian countries who are participating in this webinar. I am very grateful that this is an event to extend solidarity to the farmers. So this act essentially says that the farmer is now free to trade intra and interstate. Now, what does that mean? It says that the government has liberated the farmer. He or she can go anywhere and sell their produce in the country. Now, this statement is slightly misleading because the farmer has an arrangement where he or she can go to the what is called the Agricultural Produce Market Committee. There's a marketing area which is run by this committee, which is known as Mandi, and there is a minimum support price which is guaranteed to the farmers on 23 of the agricultural produce. But that is only in theory. In practice, the farmer gets the minimum support price only for paddy and for wheat. And in some areas, they get for other things also, for grams and other things. But it is mainly for these two grains that the farmer gets the benefit of MSP. But this benefit is available only to farmers of Punjab, Haryana, and Western UP. I mean, the arrangement is there for the entire country, but unfortunately, the system doesn't work. So what happens in my state, for example, Uttar Pradesh, I along with a farmer colleague who is the president of the farmers wing of my party, the Socialist Kisan Sabha, once we sat on a protest about 4 or 5 years back with the same demand to give minimum support price to the farmers. It was the season of paddy. The paddy MSP right now is rupees 1868 per quintal, and there's another rate for a better quality, 1888. So these rates are supposed to be given by the government procurement centers to the farmers. But what happens is when the farmer goes there, on some pretext, some excuse that the quality of the grain is not good, there is moisture in the grain, you have to have a land record so only a landowner can sell the produce. If you are a landless farmer, if you are a sharecropper, you are cultivating on somebody else's land, you cannot sell. And then the most hilarious thing is that you need the government sacks. You cannot just give it in any sack. You have to have the government sacks. So if they don't have any pretext, they will make an excuse that the government sacks are not available from the Food Corporation of India. Because ultimately all this grain goes into the Food Corporation of India godowns, from where it is distributed to the people as part of the public distribution system. In India, we have a very large food distribution program which covers almost 70 to 80% of the rural population and half of the urban population. Again, that is, in theory, there's a food security law which says that is what it should be. And the grain is available at a subsidized rate. So this grain is then given to people. And let me tell you that during the lockdown, because of COVID, public distribution system along with the National Rural Employment Guarantee were the two important programs which acted as support for people. I mean, if these two were not there, then there would have been, widespread starvation and maybe, death due to hunger. So this is such an important program, and it is sustained by the Food Corporation of India when it procures the grains from the farmers. But what happens is when the farmer goes to the government procurement center, he or she is not able to sell. There will be some middlemen who will buy the produce at a lower cost. So they will buy it, for example, from anywhere ranging from rupees 900 to rupees 1500, and then they will sell it to the government and then make that difference. So let us say they sell it for 900 rupees. So the difference between 1868 and 900 is made by the middlemen, the politicians, the bureaucrats, and anybody else who has a vested interest. So that is how, the system has been crippled and doesn't work in most of the India. In the state of Bihar, it has been dismantled completely. And let me also tell you that the farmer gets the lowest price in the state of Bihar. Now, the government says that the farmer doesn't have to sell in the APMC market at the MSP. He or she can get a higher price outside the mandi. Now, this is also very misleading because although it is called minimum support price, but actually it is the maximum price that the farmer can get. No private buyer till now has been giving a rate above MSP. So as I mentioned, the rate is 1868, but the private buyers will buy only from 900 to 1500. So the farmer has a guarantee if they go to the APMC market or the procurement centers run by the government, they can at least demand the MSP, even if they don't get it. For example, we sat on a protest for 4 days on a hunger strike to demand this MSP. It is a different matter, that we were not successful, but if it is there, we can at least demand it. But this act will make the government procurement centers or the APMC market or the MSP irrelevant, because there's a very important clause in this act which I want to read out to you, which says, so this is the section 6 of the act, which says, so the most important thing which the Prime Minister is saying is that any trader may engage in the interstate trade or intrastate trade of scheduled farmers' produce with a farmer or another trader in a trade area. He is claiming this to be an achievement, but as I have mentioned, most of the farmers don't get the rate and anyway are selling to the private buyers. Only about 6% of the farmers are able to sell their produce at the government centers and get the MSP. Most of the farmers anyway are selling outside the government procurement system. So it is not as if the farmer was not free. The farmers was already free. I mean, there was no compulsion that they would have to go and sell it at the government center. The most objectionable clause is number 6. It says, no market fee or cess or levy by whatever name called under any state APMC Act or any other state law shall be levied on any farmer or trader or electronic trading and transaction platform for trade and commerce in scheduled farmers' produce in a trade area. Now this is dubious, because you are saying that if the farmer sells outside the government system, then there will be no cess. And now let me pose a question. If there's a trader, why will the trader buy the grains inside the market now? Because there's a cess inside the government market. The trader will prefer to buy it outside because he doesn't have to pay any cess. And when this system will come into place, the government procurement system with the guarantee of minimum support price will become irrelevant, and after the government procurement system is dismantled, then the private traders will buy at any rate, and it will be the compulsion of the farmers to sell their produce, because as you know, almost all farm produce are perishable, and of course he needs money for the next crop cycle. So this is a trap in which the farmers can fall if this act is implemented, and that is why they are so vehemently protesting outside Delhi. The president of the Punjab Socialist Party, to which I belong, says that we are fighting to save our right of MSP, and a core demand that has emerged from this movement is that the minimum support price should be made a legal right. What the government has done is trying to dismantle the government procurement system by the APMC and a guarantee of minimum support price, not a legal guarantee yet. And the farmer is demanding that you retain it and you make it a legal guarantee. Just like the last government of Dr. Manmohan Singh made the food security a legal right, education a legal right, rural employment a legal right. In a similar manner, the farmers are demanding that you make the minimum support price a legal guarantee. That has emerged as the core demand from this movement, and that is an achievement of this movement. And the government is not willing to do it, primarily for the reason that all this corruption which is involved sustains the political system of India. I mean, that is what I was told when we sat on fast to demand the MSP for the farmers in UP. One of the bureaucrats told me that, if the government starts giving the guarantee of MSP, then how will the political parties sustain? So it is the corruption which has been sustaining this system where the farmers' produce is not procured by the government at MSP in most of the country. And now people suspect that, this government is supporting the capitalists. The Prime Minister doesn't hide his friendship with two of the most powerful, business houses in the country now. One belonging to Mr. Ambani, and there are two Ambanis. So Mukesh Ambani is the one who is very close to the Prime Minister, the elder brother. And then there is Gautam Adani, who comes from the same estate as Mr. Narendra Modi. Actually, Ambani also comes from the same estate, although he was nationally well known before Mr. Modi came to power. But Gautam Adani was not known nationally. He was a state level businessman. But after Mr. Modi became Prime Minister, and let me tell you that when, as Chief Minister of Gujarat, he went to take the oath of Prime Minister of India, he traveled in Adani's aircraft. He didn't use a government aircraft. So, as I said, he doesn't hide his friendship with these two business houses, and the people suspect that, these laws, all the three laws, if you will examine the other two laws, they are also in the interest of the corporate houses. The government wants to benefit these corporations, and that is why the people are opposing it. They don't want their right to be able to obtain a certain price from the government to go away. And it is quite natural because, there are guarantees of different kind to different people. People in government can get, fixed salaries. Corporations like Coca-Cola and Pepsi can sell their bottle of water, which they obtain for free from under the ground for 20 rupees a liter, which is almost, the 15 to 20 times the cost of the production. Whereas farmer is asking just for 1.5 times the cost of his input. And this is a recommendation of the Swaminathan Commission. The government says we have given it, but the way they have calculated, they have left out the cost of the land and the labor contributed by the farmer's family. So the farmers are saying that you take all the costs into account, which is called C2. The cost of the land, the labor, of the farmer's family, and then you give us the 1.5 times. And the government of India is not giving 1.5 times of the cost of input to the farmers, whereas all the, private corporations are making huge profits. And finally, let me tell you what the Prime Minister said in the Parliament, the upper house of the Parliament. He said, MSP was there, MSP is there, and will remain in future. Now, this is also a very misleading statement. Our Prime Minister is known to make statements like this. A lot of people, his supporters, have been arguing that the Prime Minister is saying that the MSP will be there. It will not be abolished. But this is a statement like, if I say government schools were there, the government schools are there today and will be there in future. Now, this statement is factually correct. But what has happened is, as private schools have entered the arena of education, the quality of government schools has gone down. My father, all the people in the previous generation went to government schools, but I have to send my children to private schools because the quality of government schools has gone down so much that anybody who can afford to send their children to private schools are not sending their children to government schools, including the government teachers. So the government schools are there, but their quality is very bad, and the literacy rate of India is quite bad because of that. And there's a court order in my state that the government employees should send their children to government schools, but the government doesn't listen to it, that doesn't implement it, and is promoting the private schools. So it is something similar to that. There is a government system of procurement, there is an MSP, but as you allow the private players to come into this market, the government system will be weakened, it may not vanish, but it will remain only on paper, and the farmer will lose the right to obtain MSP, which is there right now, although not a legal guarantee. So the farmer, so finally, before ending, I'll say that we don't want the acts which have been made by the government of India. The farmers are asking for the repeal of these acts, and instead the farmers are demanding that minimum support price should be made a legal guarantee. We need an act to make minimum support price a legal guarantee. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Pandey. That was very good. I think it's very clear to us what and how this emerged with the support of the big business and the private, links that the Modi government has with big business. So that's very interesting for us. Also, the call and the demands from the farmers that we should make the MSP a legal guarantee. I think that's very critical in the struggle. So we hear you. So thank you for that. And I'm just wondering whether Professor Duvuru Narasimha is ready to speak.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Sandeep Pandey. Now we'll have Prof. Please go ahead.
Shall I go ahead? Hello?
Yeah. Yes, sir. You can go ahead.
Okay, fine. I think.
You're fine. Yeah.
Thank you very much, and I'm grateful to ILPS, particularly it was Chennai who prompted me to be part of this again. I'm very happy to be again part of the larger solidarity with the farming community that's perhaps protesting against these laws. I would confine myself, as was suggested earlier to me, the contextualization of these laws as to how they're essentially as a part of the larger agenda of bringing the whole of the economic regime under neoliberalism. In fact, for quite some time, right from 1991, agriculture, when the neoliberal reforms were launched, had to be a kind of an exception because it is so in the rest of the world as well. I don't think there is any country in the world where they have blatantly tried to push agriculture into entirely the fold of neoliberal regime. There were hesitation, but I think presently the three laws are celebrated by those who are supporting them, and in fact some of them are also the nominees of the Supreme Court panel to look into it, which is, I think, a very strange kind of thing. Started writing and celebrating it as some kind of a 1991 moment. I mean, all of us know what 1991 moment in India meant. 1991 was the year when India shifted aggressively towards that of neoliberalism by dismantling most of the regulatory systems, and then, of course, becoming part of the larger global process of liberalization and privatization, of which the major thrust was deregulation of, let's say, industrial policy, decontrol of, let's say, trade and other measures, and then, of course, increasingly liberalizing national as well as, of course, international trade regulations. And in fact, the critical part that perhaps is very important in the present context is withdrawing the state from the economic domain gradually. And of course, it started in a range of sectors, as perhaps to pick up Pandey's, it has gone down to that of the social sector like that, education, health, extremely in the process of privatization, right from, of course, extensively privatizing industry, and then, of course, most of the investment activities. That process has been unleashed in 1991. But in the case of agriculture, there was, of course, a problem because they had to begin somewhere, and then they started in 1991 looking at bringing agriculture to the market regime by trying to meddle with the special provisions, like, for instance, priority lending to agriculture to that by the banking sector. In fact, it was there right from 70s since the nationalization of the banks. There was a reservation of lending specifically to that of agriculture sector up to 18% of the total bank loans. There was a commission called Narsimham Committee or Commission on Banking Affairs. It tried to suggest that this priority sector lending could be, let's say, withdrawn. But there were huge protests and therefore this could not be pushed through. But what happened was indirectly, right from 1991, there was a peaking of lending to that of agriculture sector by the commercial banks, mostly nationalized banks, right from the 70s. But suddenly from 90s to that of 2000, there was a decline in the share that was going to that of farmers. But I think there were extensive protests, and then there were several measures. Although directly nothing was brought in openly as a part of the larger agenda, they started, let's say, meddling with that of investment structure. The state gradually started squeezing its investment. In fact, in the 80s, the state had something like of the total investments in agriculture, it was about something like 8% of the agriculture GDP. The state's contribution was almost half. But by the time it is 2000, it has got increased to that of, let's say, almost 18% as agriculture GDP. But the state's share, instead of being 50%, has come down to that of 25%. I mean, this is reflected in several investment projects in the infrastructure in Indian agriculture. And there was, of course, opening up of, let's say, the seed sector to that of 100% FDI. In fact, the pivotal role played by the state and then central seed corporations in promoting quality seeds and pushing the so-called green revolution. The entire seed corporations now are just defunct. In many places, they are not even there. And then, of course, agriculture extension was vastly destroyed, state after state, and there is hardly anything that could be mentioned as quality agriculture extension available. These things did happen, but by the 2000 and odd, I mean, in fact, this gave some kind of a initiative to the government. Then I'm saying that it is not the present government which is trying to push agriculture into that of, let's say, the neoliberal regime. There were efforts made, but of course, they were all piecemeal kind of efforts. In fact, they became bold in 2000. There was a new, what is called as, let's say, National Agriculture Policy in 2000. There was a pronouncement, and of course, the pronouncement, I quote, private sector participation promoted through contract farming and land leasing arrangements to allow for accelerated technology transfer, capital inflow, and assured market for crop production should be brought in. This was the announcement in 2000 by the then government. But I think we know by 2000 early years, it was clear there were extensive suicides, there was huge farmers' mobilization, and there was the entire so-called statement of the National Agriculture Policy had to be kept down. I mean, in fact, this sounds fresh. This is exactly what is happening now. That promoting, let's say, contract farming, land leasing arrangements, allowing corporate sector to bring in accelerated technology, capital inflow. But I think the then government could not perhaps move forward. And then therefore there was a huge protest, and then on the contrary, they had to unleash extension of credit and bring in various measures like that of even the writing off credit, debt relief, and debt write-offs, and debt kind of, let's say, programs for agriculture. Therefore, the intention to make agriculture as a part of, let's say, the neoliberal regime, and then, of course, withdraw state support, faced a serious hurdle. But I think this regime, which is celebrating now, in fact, it is not only those who are supporting, talking about the government now slowly coming in. Even as the farmers' agitation is going on for 3 months, the finance minister and the prime minister come out and say that they have an agenda they have the agenda, big agenda they have been talking about right from 2014. That agenda, which sums up what could be called as neoliberal regime. Their agenda is minimum government and maximum governance. And it means that in all sectors. And therefore, they have been waiting. In fact, the finance minister recently, when questions are asked, your new budget seems to be a path-breaking move towards that of the corporate sector, she didn't hide anything. She said, this is our agenda for quite some time. In 2014-15, we had very limited kind of a support in the parliament. We didn't have absolute majority, and Rajya Sabha was a problem. And of course, the way in which now they're using their brute majority in Lok Sabha, and that, of course, the majority in Rajya Sabha, could be seen the way in which it is being pushed now. One of the things that is widely observed is the fact that agriculture is constitutionally state subject. They come through intervention with the central laws, some kind of a technical provisions in the concurrent list, and then try to bring in laws. The way in which they bring in, there was a COVID time, and they bring in ordinances in June, and then it's followed up by introducing bills in the Lok Sabha. The speed with which it is done, in fact, it's very interesting to note that on September 14th, the 3 bills were introduced in Lok Sabha, and then by 17th, all the bills were passed. Hardly any discussion on that. And then, of course, that also led to the protests of some of one member of her in this government resigning. And in 20th, it goes to Rajya Sabha. There was leave alone discussion, a violation of basic rule of division of the House. And by voice vote, it was pushed through as illegal. And then by 24th, the president gives consent. By the consent, this is all these 3 laws have been put through that of legislation through stealth. There was hardly any parliamentary select committee which looked into it. There was no involvement of any state debate in spite of this being a state subject. And then, of course, the complete, let's say, pushing through. This was done largely because they thought their time has come to push this neoliberal agenda. In fact, their time was there. And in fact, the very next year they came to power. One of the major things that happened was they appointed a high power committee. They were always, let's say, critical of the program of food security and the program of, let's say, procurement. And of course, as Pandey was trying to refer to that, they had to, let's say, keep on saying that they had a MSP. In fact, if you look at the way in which they're rising MSP, this time it's just 2% increase, where, of course, it is not even equal to that of compensating for the inflation. And then, in fact, when it comes to the question of the legislative measures, there is the origin, even 2015 itself. They wanted to dismantle the procurement system, wanted to perhaps slowly wind up food corporation system, and therefore they appointed a high power committee called the Shantakumar Committee in 2015. The committee, of course, came out with recommendations where they said that there should be reduction in procurements, reduction in the number of people getting benefits from public distribution system, and of course there must be increasing role of the corporate sector in the agricultural promotion and marketing. And this is the one which was pending till 2015, largely as the finance minister now says that they didn't have majority in the Rajya Sabha. They had very coalition support in that of, let's say, parliament, and therefore they couldn't bring in. Now they thought it's an opportune time to bring in. In fact, of course, the year following 2015, there was an economic survey which was again re-emphasizing this. I again quote this agenda. If persuasion fails, and it has been tried for a long time since 2003, it may be necessary to see what the center can do, and taking account of the allocation of subjects under the Constitution of India. This is, I think, a loud pronouncement in the economic survey in 2015 itself, that they are ready to, let's say, go in. But of course, the time as they opportune time is very explosive. 2019 saw huge mobilization of farmers because agriculture has been in the 90s. Nations could be seen lakhs of farmers coming to reside. India for less than 2 hectares, and the practice in areas increasing the cost of production that came down, have been increasing kind of, let's say, failures due to the kind of say shift in cropping pattern, lack of assistance in the form of extension, unbridled kind of use of, let's say, whatever that comes in the name of hybrids, and then of course the even GM kind of, let's say, crops in some areas like cotton. The agriculture is in deep crisis, particularly small marginal farmers. And in fact, to address this, it requires a larger kind of state agenda. Instead, the government has been trying to wait for some funds, let's say, itself out of, let's say, and push it directly to the hands of the vested interests in the corporate sector. For instance, one can sum up their textbook expressions of what could be called as neoliberal. For instance, the three emphasized what could be referred to deregulation, corporatization, and then of control. What is that? The first law is a symbol of regulation. Let's say you take state out of any regulation on agriculture market in the name of making farmers access what they call prices without any restrictions in the form, let's say, regulated APM, agricultural regulated markets, and opening up of across the border trade. They are trying to say that the farmer stands to gain by providing. This is all interesting expressions of neoliberalism, access to that of freedom to sell anywhere in the free market across the country or even across the borders and get maximum price. And then the second law, that is the first law which we are talking in terms of APMC regulation law, which is supposed to be now put into that of, let's say, some kind of a truncated system, open the markets. And then when we refer to the second one, which is, of course, contract farming law in summary, is the one which is trying to bring in corporates aggressively into that of, let's say, agriculture. It's not that corporate farming has not been tried in India. It has been tried, and then everybody knows that there have been huge problems, even in small places, better off places like Punjab. And then, of course, still, this is the route through which you can push. That law, if you read full text, it looks as if that law would bring in better quality inputs to the farmers, better, let's say, extension to the farmers, better markets to the farmers, better price to the farmers. It's a very strange kind of a thing. None of those things happen, what little contract farm had. It also tells the other story. All these things, better inputs, better so-called extension, and better quality of what is called as the agricultural management comes through private sector. It will have, let's say, a kind of, what could be called as, let's say, the control of the private sector on the farming sector. There are, I think, initiatives in the agriculture sector towards that of producers, cooperatives. There are cooperatives which are doing even procurement in some places, including the states like the ones which we are in. And they have shown promise and they require nursing, because these are all small marginal farmers, substantial, leave alone 1-2% of big farmers who may be very happy with these three laws. I'm not sure about it, but I think unless of course they join the bandwagon of the corporate sector, become their agents, most of the farmers, 86% repeatedly we are saying, are small marginal farmers, less than 5 acres. They would be in deep crisis if there is no state support for them in terms of better investment infrastructure. In fact, the laws also increasingly publicize that they create infrastructure like storage, warehouses. What does it mean? If you have, let's say, private sector storage and warehouses, all these will be the ones which would have a price. I don't think these things come free. And in the private sector, instead of putting them in the hands of public cooperatives, which in several places have them, there are also initiatives like the women's cooperatives which are trying to procure and require, let's say, storage facilities. Instead of promoting the capacity, infrastructure capacity through that of collectives of farmers, small marginal farmers, collectives or producers, farmers producer organizations, it's trying to take that away. And the third law, in fact, the corporatization, the third law is unbridled support to that of, let's say, holding. Amending Essential Services Commodities Act and trying to suggest that it could be the intervention of the state in storing could happen only when there is a hike in the price, again linked to the averages of 5 years. It never happens that way. Agriculture prices seasonal fluctuate. If you average them for the year, that would be flat. And this is all very tricky kind of laws that they bring in this, and they also link in. If you are a processor of the agricultural produce, it doesn't apply to you. You can store any amount. What does it mean? Now, the examples they were giving, there are branding of agricultural commodities right from rice now. What does it mean? That you procure, store, you say that you are a miller, branding, sell it as, let's say, Lakshmi brand the rice. That means you are, let's say, the processor. And then look at, let's say, our future groundnut oil. The entire groundnut economy, right from procurement, buying, to that of, let's say, expeller, to that of, let's say, oil, is all branded and sold now. This is the fear of the farmers. This is the regime which we call as, let's say, the neoliberalism, where the private capital dominates the entire agriculture sector. Farmers struggle. Even in the COVID times, you have a production of, let's say, 3% plus in agriculture sector. How did it happen? What was the support by the private sector? Not even government sector. They struggle and do this, and then you push it to that of the hands of, let's say, the private sector. And this is exactly where the trust of the farmers on the present government is totally gone. Whatever they may say about, we'll assure, let's say, MSP, and nobody is ready to, let's say, take it as some kind of a stable promise. That's why they're also asking for something a little bit impossible also. Make it a legislative provision. it's very, very tricky to do that. The government knows, the farmers knows. But if you're going to bring in these laws, if you have to do these kinds of things, you can also think in terms of doing guarantee. They can't do it because if you're throwing it, procurement is going to be private sector. You can't make it, let's say, a public law saying that this is, let's say, legally possible. Because the intention of these laws is to push the entire regime of, let's say, making money, profits, to that the private sector. If you bring in a legal set of, let's say, MSP, there will not be any such possibility. There's a contradictory kind of thing. Therefore, I think when it comes to the question of Indian agriculture, these laws push like any other sector. I mean, of course, they are not barred, as we were referring to, critical sectors like education and health. And then, of course, now, say mines, and then sports, airports, which is privatized. The grand design of, let's say, the liberal regime and ruling regime is the one who would like to. There's no hiding it. Therefore, it is likely to be in a country like India, where anywhere the state not playing any support system or support the farmers. But if India does it or doing it, it would be disastrous to the number of small and small farmers. Therefore, the struggle is struggle for a kind of trust, which perhaps promised in the process of success a better hold, let's say, their own economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Guru Narasimha Reddy. Thank you so much. I think it provided us a very good overview of, from 1991 to how the government, Modi government, is pushing this corporatization, and it's and they're not providing any excuse. I think, as you said, they are just saying this is what we want to do, and using the pandemic, to move these laws without any discussions. I think that for me was quite clear how they used the pandemic to curtail any protest, curtail any kind of dissent, and I think that's something that we are seeing happening in India. But also, I think for us, the strength of the farmers movement, I think, and we'll be hearing more of that. So thank you very much. That was very, very good presentation and provided us with a very good background in terms of the liberalization and corporatization of agriculture in India. And, and this is what's happening in the rest of the world as well. And all of us are facing that. But India was, in a way, a stronghold of, fighting neoliberalism for a long time. And so, and that's why it's very important that we support the movement in terms of protests and their demands. So thank you very much. I will now move on to the next speaker, and Dr. Narasimha Reddy. And of course, I know Narasimha very well because we've been working together on the pesticides issue as well. And so it's wonderful to have you here in this panel, and just to also introduce you in terms of the work that you've done, Dr. Narasimha. And today you will, basically your pioneering advocacy work against agrochemicals, disease, and also looking at agroecology, supporting the traditional handloom. It's amazing the amount of expense of the work that you have done. And you are also an activist, an activist and expert on seed issues, agriculture and organic farming. And he's also the with ICOM Asia, AP Electricity Regulatory Commission, among others. And Dr. Reddy is also a policy expert and consultant for PAN India. So, and this evening, Dr. Narasimha will be focusing on Farmers Agreement on Price Assurance and Farm Services Act. Thank you. Please go ahead, Doctor.
Thank you, Saro, for the brief introduction. I'm just building the advantages and building on what my teacher, Professor Narasimha Reddy, has built and what Sandeep Pandeyji has already mentioned. We need to understand these three laws together. I think that's what we need. You can see why they brought three of them together, and all the three are, they have a Trishul effect on three groups. So Trishul, in the Indian mythology, Hindu mythology, it's a tool with three arms. So the impact is on farmers directly and consumers, and also state government. So when you look at these three laws, I think they try to demolish any resistance from all these three groups. I'll just confine myself to one act, but we are discussing these laws amidst a lot of discussion which went on in the last 25 years on regulation of markets, input subsidies, and minimum support price, of course, and then food subsidies. So all these four areas, I think, have been subject of international pressure, especially in all the WTO rounds, even as early as in 2018, I think 17 or 18 Bali conference. So this international pressure is also we need to understand and where it is coming from. So it's not just the domestic, political ideology which is driving this. It is mostly the international pressure, and then the context. We hit the bottom. I think both Professor Narasimha Reddy and Sandeep Pandey mentioned that in the last 30 years, since 1990, gradually public sector, public funds, public institutions have been zeroed completely in various. But I think this is the final trust in agriculture. So I think that it's not that it came just out of the blue. Coming to these three acts, these are the three acts. One is the Essential Commodities Act. This is again a very old act which came in 1955, basically controlling hoarding and market prices, regulation of commodities from going into black market and the prices increasing. So this law completely removes all the foodstuffs from this control, which has been there for the past 70 years. Now, second is, of course, Sandeji has mentioned clearly, where they try to deregulate whatever market mechanisms, public market mechanisms have been established. Now, third is the Contract Farming Act. This is going to discuss because all others are discussed. What is the act? It is trying to bring national framework on farming agreements. And then, it promises the farmer can enter into agreement based on the terms and conditions, either inputs and also production, supply, quality, rate standards, price, and other such matters. And importantly, the second aspect is very important where they try to bring terms related to supply farm services. So here, I think they intend to bring seeds, they intend to bring pesticides, and then the technology surrounding the method of production. So it could be genetically modified seeds. I think this is an important question which tries to bring modern farming methods, what they say as modern farming methods. And if you look at the World Economic Forum new agriculture policy plan, I think you will understand why farm services becoming part of the national framework is very important. Of course, they define a minimum period of one crop season to 5 years or as mutually agreed. So, because, something for horticulture crops, it could be perennial, it could be 10 years. So, depending on the crop and depending on the season, I think there is a provision for minimum. Now, this is what government keeps on saying. Sponsor, sponsor is someone who is sponsoring the contract, and that sponsor is prohibited explicitly from acquiring ownership rights of the land. So this they keep mentioning as a very strong provision which is trying to protect the farmers. We'll come to that about it, and then the act itself tries to link this agreement with the credit or reserve stream of the government. That means public funds finance the contract farming agreement. I think what this is trying to say. Now, importantly, electronic registration of agreements, state authority has been mentioned. But then the word they use is shall be or should be. This wording is maybe. So that means there is a ambiguity in that. So it cannot be registered at all, as it is happening now. Now, of course, they try to exclude stock exchanges and clearing corporations from entering into farming. Importantly, sentiment has power to the direction. So, as after mentally, agriculture is in the state domain. So now, central government can give directions means state powers are taken away in particular act. And all acts also they try to they mention this clear. This is another crux where even farmers, protesting farmers are raising dispute settle. In case of a dispute between the sponsor and the farmer, the dispute settlement mechanism is by a designated authority, and that authority is subdivisional authority for district collector or below that. Here you have a country, then you have states, and then you have district. So within each they have subdivisions. So this act says whenever there is a dispute, both the parties can approach such subdivisional authority for dispute settlement. Now, I'll come to that interpretation, what it means. Basically, a big corporation like Monsanto, last 15 years of seed farming, we have seen on cotton seed. In high courts and Supreme Courts have not been able to, ensure justice for the farmers. So a small official And bureaucracy in the last 20 years has been more pliant towards corporates and corporate lobbies. So subdivisional magistrate ruling against such mighty corporations is impossible. That too, they have been given judicial powers. So this is again a big contention, and you can see the next provision which says there is a bar and jurisdiction of civil court. That means if there is a dispute, the farmer can't go to a civil court. So only the only mechanism available is going through the subdivisional authority. This is again which means government is not trying to help the farmer, rather trying to help the stronger party in this farming in this agreement. And then importantly, they override any other state law. So states have different contract farming laws, at least 15, 20 states have. So this law completely overrides that. So it is now a national law. Now important, anywhere in the world, the issue in this contract farming agreement is who owns the commodity during production. There are two kinds of production. So production contract and then marketing contract. So if the production contract is there, the ownership lies with the sponsor. But Indian experience shows that this is not, this is violated completely all the time, every time. So this law is completely silent about ownership of commodity and what are the safeguards for the farmer when this ownership is interpreted differently. So that's not there. Now land ownership, they mention government says under any circumstances the sponsor cannot claim ownership of the land. Of course, it is there specifically, but then there is a loophole in that. One loophole is they say the sponsor can erect constructions, any infrastructure on the land of the farmer, and they say it is temporary, not permanent. But then, as long as the structure is there, the control of the land is still under the sponsor. So I think this loophole is there, and that has not been cleared so far. So that means when there is a temporary structure created by the company on the land of the farmer, and if there is a dispute and the farmer tries to wriggle out of that contract, he cannot do on his own, or he cannot sell that land because there is a temporary structure and that structure will be removed by the sponsor on his own or their own terms. So this loophole can give control over the land to the sponsor. I think that has not been understood clearly. Now, of course, the act is very simple. They say it's a contract, and both contracting parties should understand the act, the agreement, and then sign it. But then there is a specific wording which says which has happened. Experience says most companies, they don't provide contract papers to the farmers. So in this law, they say they can read and sign, but nowhere they say the contract farming papers should be given to the farmers, and there should be 2 copies of the contract. And that has been used against the farmers in many of the experiences. So I'll just go through the experiences. It's not that contract farming is completely new before this act. So long back, we have sugarcane farming, which is a sort of contract farming with sugar factories. In fact, we have 20 different kinds of laws which tries to define this contract between sugar factories, whether they are in public sector, whether they are in cooperative sector, or whether they are in private sector with the farmers. So there, in the last 50, 60 years, uh, the experience shows that a farmer always gets low price, even though there is a state advisory price, and then the even central government fixes the price for the sugarcane. But on the other hand, factories keep claiming that this state advisory price is against free market system, and they are losing out. But ultimately, we are seeing in the last 20, 30 years, sugarcane farmers facing delayed payments and less than market price payments for many years. Uttar Pradesh, I think, from where Sandeep Pandey comes, I think he can explain much better how farmers are facing, sugarcane farmers are facing problems. So here one aspect I just want to mention how contract farming can change the kind of farming. In sugarcane long back when I was young, there used to be a thick cane with 80% of water. And sugarcane price is defined based on the weight. So, at that time, sugar factories did research, and then they reduced the water content in the sugar cane, and they brought a new kind of cane, seed cane. And when farmers were not ready to take it because, because of the weight loss, they lose the payments. So then they added a bonus on that seed cane with a reduced weight. So today we have only that tin cane with enough glucose for the sugar factories to recover, but then the weight is reduced weight. So farmers in the past 25 years, I know earlier they were paid a bonus of 200 rupees per ton, but now they end up with sugar cane, which gives better yield for the sugar factories, but for them it is a complete loss because the weight has reduced. So that means they have to focus more and more on productivity. That means they have to do intensive agriculture. So this kind of change can be brought in through contract farming, and that's how sponsor can control. We have experience, bad experience with potato. PepsiCo recently in 2018, they filed cases against four farmers claiming 1 crore rupees, by damage for misusing the seed given by them. So there have been protests, but ultimately PepsiCo had to back down. But potato contract farming experience in Gujarat, Rajasthan, in parts of Uttar Pradesh shows that farmers are not gaining, and they quickly come out of that contract farming agreement. Cotton seed, down south in Andhra Pradesh, erstwhile Andhra Pradesh and now Telangana, Mahbub Nagar, we have seen in the past 15, 18 years when the seed became deregulated, BT cotton production, BT cotton seed production has been happening in Mahbub Nagar district, where child labor is rampant because farmers don't get enough price from the companies, and even the companies are directly not involved. They work through organizers. So this area we still see that destitution, poverty, even though cotton seed turnover in India rose from 2,000 crores to now 15,000 crores. So companies have become fat, companies have become rich, and Monsanto has gained a lot out of it. But the cotton seed farmers, under the contracts, they did not gain anything. In fact, suicides are very high. Recently, just yesterday, we were discussing 1,132 farmers committed suicide by consuming pesticide in Mahabubnagar district. We got information through RTA. So this kind of mismatch between the contract farming parties is there. Now government has been encouraging oil palm agreements as well. In fact, after this law has been enacted, now government is pushing for palm oil, and they want to export as well against Malaysian palm oil, which is very cheap. So, but then even there, farmers have been fighting deficient payments, delayed payments. So we have seen in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, many farmers, 2 years back, they cut down the palm, plantation because it was not fetching prices to them. But now again, a subsidized model has come where contract farming is encouraged through public subsidy. So that is so these are the experiences, and there are other experiences where farmers have been the losers and companies have been the gainers. And this law does not, analyze or assess that experience, and it does not take the side of the farmer in the sense of going from the backdrop of the experience. So if you look at the legal history, it's again, there is a model Agriculture Produce Market Committee Act 2003, where they try to encourage contract farming. And at that time, they said APMCs, market yards can record the contracts. And that was approved by 14 states only. All other states did not approve. Later, much later, another model act has been brought out by the current government, under Narendra Modi in 2018. So this is the Agriculture Produce Livestock Contract Farming Act, and they proposed a separate authority for each state under this act. Now the current act, is, there is no authority. The only dispute mechanism is at district level. So, but the earlier, this model act proposed a separate state level authority. Then they said that there should be a registration, a recording, and they try to establish the principles for predetermination of price, which is very, very important. Because, if you look at the current law, when it tries to link with the other two laws and the electronic exchange, I think there is a linkage with the future contracts. So the predetermination of price is again in the hands of the sponsor, basically the company which enters into the contract farming, and not the farmer. So, but then that earlier model act has at least some principles. Now, in terms of what is not there in the current act, you can see cost of services. It's completely blank there. But this is very important. If you look at the poultry industry, poultry farmers who are under contract, they lose rupees per bird just because they are under contract. Because they get the services of inoculation, they get assured birds, chicks from the supplier. So this cost of services, whether they will be part of the price or excluding the price, is not clear. So companies have a provision where they can claim more out of this cost of services. So this act is completely blank about it. And second, there are no mandatory clauses in contract.
Sorry to interrupt, Narasimha, but you have like 2 minutes to wrap up.
Okay, I'll just finish in the next slide.
Okay, thank you very much.
And there is earlier, that 2018 Act, there was talk about exempting the sponsor from stock limits. Now, of course, with the repeal of Essential Commodities Act, So now anyone can have whatever stock levels they can have. Now this is my final slide. What is going to happen because of this contract law? One, public subsidies can still be given, but the benefit probably goes to the sponsor or the company. So there is no government is not silent about it, but so ultimately I think it's going to be public subsidies are going to provide a bigger margin for the companies. Now land tenure, the government, parallelly is trying to reform land tenural laws across the country. So I think even though Contract Farming Act tries to protect the farmers, but when you look at that liberalization there, I think increasingly the land tenure is going to be under the threat because of this act. Cropping pattern will change because we have seen a number of cases where contracts where only monocropping happens and only particular cropping happens. So the diversity which is there in India in several states, we have 600 crops. I think that's going to be lost. And of course, finance and investment, government is encouraging international funds to come. So recently there was a study where investment funds on agriculture, which were only 33, have jumped to 300. So I think these investment funds are going to do what they did in hospitals, what they did in education, and what they did in other sectors, completely sucking out the resources and profiting margin profit at any cost. And importantly, automation. I think this is going to happen. So agriculture labor, who are 30% of Indian population, still they are going to lose out once this contract farming becomes bigger and grows. So they, because automation is being encouraged by the government and they are subsidizing automation. So as I said, agriculture workers are also going to lose out in this. And dispute resolution, I mentioned, it is very limited, and it is against the farmers, uneducated, illiterate, small and marginal farmers, and they're against the might of the big corporations. So overall, Contract Farming Act may not spread as fast as they are expecting, but it is going to distort the relations, and it is going to distort the even markets currently, at least in some products where farmers are getting better price. So, and of course it will enable or facilitate a withdrawal of public funds. So finally, I want to say contract farming is not the best answer, and it is not a standalone answer. I am talking from the experience in the US as well, because in US only 7% of the farms are under contracts. Sustainability is a big question, and then they might get assured income, at least at best, but then it may not be remunerative. It may not be double income which government is promising, and it is not suitable for all agriculture products. It suits only some plantations and some grains, and not at all for everything. So it leads to monocropping, and it's not efficient, even though they say it is efficient. We have seen how resource-intensive agriculture, pesticide usage increases because of these corporate, contract farming arrangements. So ultimately, companies will be involved in fewer crops, and I think that will mean the entire Indian cropping pattern diversity is going to reduce, and will go the way we are seeing in the US. So that means the entire food system in India is going to be impacted through these three laws. So I think the overall again and again I would like to reiterate that we need to look at these three laws together and not separately, because all these three laws try to subvert the constitutional provisions, and they also try to encourage private investment at the cost of farmers and consumers. And I'll stop here. Thank you for giving me this time.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Narasimha. I think it was very clear in terms of the contract farming and how it's going to destroy farmers' livelihoods and the whole food security. And I think also the biodiversity, as you talked about, efficiency and sustainability will be affected. I think this contract farming has failed in all the places where it has been introduced. Failed in the sense that it never actually provided support for the farmers. In fact, it's the other way around. It has disadvantaged and actually gotten farmers to lose their land and their livelihoods and increase poverty actually in the rural areas. So I think thank you very much for that. And you're right, we have to look at all the three farm laws as a whole and its impact. I think that's really important. And while we are looking at each of the laws, it's we want to understand a little bit better in terms of what it means and what is the impact in terms of on farmers. So thank you very much, Dr. Reddy. I just want to, before I go to the next speaker, I just want to remind everyone there is translation. So if you go to below your Zoom, there is a button that says interpretation. So you could choose to go to Hindi or stay in English. And for Hindi, it's if you're also like similar, it's also slightly similar to Urdu. So for those who would like to have that interpretation, please switch the button to Hindi, so you will hear the simultaneous interpretation. So now I think the next speaker, Jaini Haleem. She's the IMSE Executive Director and a prominent social activist in Kolkata. She's also the Executive Director of the Institute for Motivating Self-Employment, or IMSE. Dr. Haleem currently holds prestigious positions in various international organizations, including the global FAFO of IFAD, which is the Farmers Forum, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, based in Rome. She's also the ICC member of ILPS, so she's also the member International Coordinating Committee of ILPS. And here we will hear from her. She'll discuss the Essential Commodities Act and corporatization in agriculture. Unfortunately, I was told that Jaini is on transit and will join us later, but now we have Pooja Moitra from IMSE also, who will share with us her presentation. Thank you, Pooja. Go ahead.
Thank you, Sarojini. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. So I would be reading out the speech shared by Ma'am, Jaini Ma'am. So IMSE is a voluntary social organization working in Eastern India since 1970s. IMSE believes equity and justice are preconditions for comprehensive development. Participation of people in decision making at all levels, coupled with good governance, and strengthen our democracy. IMSE believes in people's rights to protest for claiming fundamental rights or human rights, which are embedded in our Constitution and also enshrined in UN Declaration of Human Rights, to which our nation is a signatory. The organization has taken pioneering role in advocating for genuine agrarian reform and sustainable agriculture. It has sensitized people and policymakers to promote right to food and to implement various voluntary guidelines linked to it, like VGRTF and VGP. Through evidence-based advocacy work and series of dialogues with peasants and state representatives, IMSE believes in land to the tillers principle and in food sovereignty as an overarching umbrella of comprehensive development. IMSE is happy to share its views on the Essential Commodity Act 2020 and its probable impacts. It is to be noted that ECA 2020 needs to be integrated together with two other Farm Acts of 2020 and New Levies Act introduced in India in recent past. Agriculture sector remains the major source of livelihoods for India, as around 50% of the population depends on this sector for livelihood. Though agriculture's contribution to GDP has decreased, but its importance as a major pillar of Indian economy remains as before. The agri-food system of India has experienced many changes, starting from the Green Revolution 70s and present push for corporatization and contract farming. The Green Revolution, which coined the slogan "Grow More Food," failed miserably to empower small farmers and resulted into monocropping and irreversible loss of soil and environment. Whereas neoliberalization push and contract farming is resulting into land grabbing and increasing poverty of poor peasants. The agrarian policy of the country has never been serious in implementing genuine agrarian reform, including redistributive land reform. Rather, cosmetic solutions were prescribed, gradually leading to corporatization of agriculture, surrendering before WTO, and reverse land reform, alienation of land from poor coupled with land grabbing by corporates, where any degree of land reform was carried out, for example, in West Bengal. Despite this empowerment of smallholders, intensive modern agriculture has increased the food production to quite an extent, and India, which was once a food importing country, is now self-reliant in terms of food produce. However, now Indian agrarian policies indicate that the government is aspiring to make India a food exporting country. Thus, the new Agriculture Acts or amendments, all three of them paving way to further corporatization of agriculture and opening up opportunities for big agribusiness to focus on food export or agri-export at the cost of fundamental rights of these and all people of India to enjoy right to food and food sovereignty. These three acts are interpreted together with the new Land Lease Act, which is easing process of land leasing, um, benefiting big agri companies. In this larger context, we must look at the Essential Commodity Act 2020 and understand the probable implications of this amended act in terms of food sovereignty of people in India. Now I'll brief about the Essential Commodity Act that was in 1995. The original Essential Commodities Act of 1995 deals with the control of the production, supply, and distribution of certain essential commodities like cereals, pulses, oilseeds, onion, potatoes, edible oils, and more. The list of essential commodities is not fixed, and state government has the power to include any item under the essential commodity list if necessary. The Act ensures there is no hoarding and black marketing of essential commodities by the government. The Act of 1955 is mainly used to curb inflation by allowing the center to enable control by state governments of trade in many essential commodities. In fact, the state government has the power to dictate quantities traders can store and also restrict the movement of any commodity which is listed as essential. The government generally imposes stock limits to discourage hoarding of items, including food commodities as mentioned above. There are different opinions about effectiveness of the 1955 ECA. Experts argue that the ECA 1995 is more appropriate for a food importing country and it creates restrictions for food exports, thereby keeping poor farmers poor. There have been implementation challenges too. Some even argue that farmers are not getting better prices of their crops due to the ECA 1995, as it tactically discourages investors to invest in cold storage warehouses, etc. In short, ECA 1995 is designed more for safeguarding food security of the local people and less for the large-scale export. Despite challenges, the key objective of the Act is laudable. The new amendment resulting into 2020 are as follows. The new Act has introduced many changes. It has removed the control of the state from regulating stocking of essential commodities and has also taken out most essential commodities from the list like cereals, oilseeds, edible oil, potatoes, onions, etc. The new Act is an open invitation for agribusiness corporation to procure any amount of agro products for export without any concern for food security of the locals, well-being of the smallholders or well-being of environment. To add any new item in EC list as per new amendment, government will be totally dependent on prevailing market price and can only declare any item as an essential commodity if there is a 100% increase in the retail price of horticulture produce and 50% increase in the retail price of non-perishable agriculture food items. The stocks of agribusiness equivalent to their export order will not to be subject to any limits. The new amendment further adds the supply of the foodstuffs, including cereals, pulses, potato, onions, edible oil, seeds, and oils, as the central government may, by the notification of the official gazette, specify may include war, famine, extraordinary price rise, and natural calamity of grave nature. In brief, ECA will deregulate the production, storage, movement, and distribution of these food commodities. It will facilitate contract farming, where agribusiness companies can purchase a crop at a certain price at a fixed rate before profit. Farmers will be at mercy of the big companies, who will also provide inputs and charge farmers for that, and now will be able to procure any amount of crop for hoarding or export. The reasons for us to be concerned are that there are many reasons which are flagged by farmer groups, trader groups, as well as consumers. Most prominent reasons are foodstuffs like cereals, pulses, potato, onions, edible oilseeds, and oils are part of common people's edible everyday diet. If the government deregulates the supply of such items fully, there will be a hoarding and subsequent price hike. Consumers will end up paying more prices, including smallholders who will also be consumers in contract farming, and that extra profit will not reach the peasant household. Government argues that farmers' income will increase as they will not be required to sell their produce in the local mandi, but will be free to sell it anywhere. In Indian context, we do know that small peasants have least bargaining capacity while confronting big agri-giants. Therefore, this argument is utopian. What in reality will happen is that agri-giants will go deep into villages to buy crops directly from the farmers. This will have many adverse impacts. Production of crop will be largely determined by the export needs of the big agri-giants. This may lead to the intensification of monocropping, hampering the food security of people and making country again dependent on food import. Large-scale procurement may artificially alter price of produce, and there will always be fear of hoarding of food items by big business houses. In a nutshell, ECA 2020 not only disempowers farmers and pushes them for contract farming, it also makes poorer sections of population vulnerable to food insecurity. It violates states' mandate to respect, protect, and fulfill right to food, which is a fundamental human right. Experts have also pointed out that, like two other amendments, this amendment is an attempt to curb federal states' role in regulating food security and agrarian economy. ECA 2020 is a highly centralized act. As a way forward, I would like to suggest new farm Acts are introduced at a time when economic sustainability of peasantries and environmental issues remain a critical challenge in the agriculture across the nation. The new amendments have not addressed the fundamental or inherent problems of Indian agriculture, that is, unequal distribution of resources, both land and other inputs, and inadequate proper regulatory policies to empower smallholders. It may be mentioned here that the voluntary guidelines on responsible governance of tenure of land, fisheries, and forests in the context of national food security was endorsed by the Committee on World Food Security on 11 May 2012, to which India was a signatory. To quote, the objective of the guidelines include the overarching goals of the voluntary guidelines on responsible governance of tenure of land, fisheries, and forests in the context of national food security are to achieve food security for all and support the progressive realization of the right to adequate food in the context of national food security. While supporting efforts towards the eradication of hunger and poverty, the guidelines are also intended to contribute to achieving sustainable livelihoods, social stability, housing security, rural development, environmental protection, and sustainable social and economic development. As a signatory to VGGT, it is expected Government of India will implement the same in its existing policy. And while forming new policies related to land tenure and food security, if we look at ECA 2020, we will just see the opposite. No political will of the government to implement above guidelines for betterment of livelihoods of smallholders. Also, ECA 2020 may directly hamper the food security of millions who depend on the public food distribution system. The time has come for the people to support demands of the protesting farmers and to urge the government to abide by the basic human rights obligations, to start with right to life, right to live with dignity. Many contract farmers in India committed suicide in the past due to crop failure and indebtedness. Right to food and right to livelihood is an intrinsic part of the right to feed oneself. As a social organization working for promotion of food sovereignty, we urge the government to carry out the unfinished task of land reform, followed by agrarian reform, to control penetration of agribusiness in smallholder agriculture and to discourage contract farming. We urge the government to ensure the smallholders get support from the state to develop their capacity to produce enough food for local consumption, that local trade is prioritized over export of food, that agroecology is promoted to address overall environmental concerns, which will not be the case if contract farming dominates the scene, that adequate infrastructure is built by the government to support smallholders so that they can make good living out of agriculture, and last but not the least, uphold food security of the people over corporate profit. Thank you. And along with this speech, I would like to share a video with you all. If there is time, I don't know, Sarojini, do we have time to share a video?
Yes, but maybe we could set it up. JC and Stephen, can you help us with this video?
No, I can share this screen. That's not an
Okay.
issue. Yeah. Okay.
Is it very long?
No, it's really short one.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, so this video actually beautifully describes the plight of the farmers, and there were clippings from the various farmer protests across the country.
Thank you very much, Pooja. There's a request that we get a copy of the paper that you read, the presentation. So if you could share it with the Secretariat, I think they would like to have it, and we can share it among the network partners and maybe those who also join this webinar. Dr. Reddy, we also would like to have your PowerPoint, because there seems to be, from the chat, there is a request that you share this with the people who are in the webinar. So thanks. Okay, so I will open, because we are kind of running out of time, maybe for 10 minutes, an open forum for those who would like to ask questions. I think there was one question which was then replied to, so we won't go into that question, but are there other questions that participants and attendees want to share? I couldn't actually find any question on the chat box. Just maybe a comment. There was a nice comment from Victor Garcia about, any contract should be a social contract and not a, corporatization, contract farming. Any other questions?
Saro, I have a question. This is Azra.
Yes, please go ahead, Azra.
From the three presentations, and excellent presentations, all of them, it was quite obvious that it is the private sector, and as has been said earlier, very much a replay of what is happening at the international scene of the WTO. I was wondering if people have studied the interlinkages of these three farm bills directly to the agreements within the WTO, and which corporates by name are responsible for what is happening in the US, apart from the two names that were given of the local corporate elite, but are there international ones who are also actively acting? Thank you.
Anyone would like to respond to this question? Yes. Ready? Please go ahead.
I think it's, of course, a lot of corporations, but specifically it is also the countries. If you look at, public stockholding as part of the WTO discussions, I think countries like US, even European Union, and all developed countries, they were against public stockholding in India. So they wanted public stockholding to go, because that will mean international trade can continuously happen, and that dependence on public stocks for food security will go away, and international trade will happen. So I think the pressure was completely from advanced developed countries to remove public subsidies for agriculture production and then public stockholding as well. And apart from procurement, public procurement, which, they interpreted it as a public subsidy. And this World Economic Forum, which I mentioned, that's where most of these corporations come together, and they bring policymakers, even heads of the countries, and also most of the elected officials from the states also participate from India in those World Economic Forum. So all these people are influenced by the discussions there where they talk of a new agriculture plan, and that agriculture plan basically tries to endorse what these three laws are trying to bring in. So, and of course, you have big corporates like Cargill, which want to enter Indian market because this is a very big domestic market. So the US-India talks, I think there one of the pressure points is to liberalize imports from US. So there we have been fighting. US imports are mostly genetically modified corn, and most of them are GM crops. So, but India does not have. It does not. It has not yet approved any GM crops in the food sector. So these talks have been, there have been pressure for long to liberalize these imports as well. So there are several pressure points, and that's coming from different been saying about it for a long time.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Reddy. Can we, there's a comment and there are two questions. I'll just read it. This comment from Victor Garces. He says, no corporate contract farming is acceptable, but a contract farming agreement can be made by a pro-people government to the farmers to produce food for society. I think that's a good comment. Then there is two questions. One is the Indian government tries to defend the farm laws, assuring that MSP for farmers will not be removed. This seems to be the anti-farmers protest narrative. What needs to be exposed in this kind of narrative, and who would you and how would you respond to this? So that's one question, and that's it, I think. Yeah. Okay. Anyone from the panelists can respond to this?
I thought Sandeep Pandey will respond. If otherwise, I think, yeah, okay, he's there.
Yeah.
Sandeep, you
Yeah. I'm sorry, Sarojini. I'm struggling to talk to the police because some of my friends have been detained at a police station. Can you just repeat the question?
Okay. Yes, I'm just going back to the question. Well, basically it says that the Indian government seems to be defending the farm laws and assuring that MSP for farmers will not be removed. But this seems to be a narrative from the government which is anti-farmers. And so what needs to be exposed in this kind of narrative And how would you respond to this?
Yeah, I think I had already mentioned this in my presentation, that the Prime Minister says that the MSP was there, is there, and will be there in future. And I had mentioned that this is similar to saying that the government schools were there, are there, and will be there in future. But the problem is that as soon as you bring in private players, the government system weakens, and we have seen it in sector after sector, not just education, healthcare, telecommunications, transportation. Our government telephone services provided by the BSNL, are considerably now weakened because of the entry of private players. In fact, Mr. Ambani has come in with a big company which offered the phone services for free for the first 6 months using the towers of BSNL, the government company. And now when they are established in the market, now of course they are charging their fees, and it appears as if they will push BSNL out of the market. Similarly, the government, even the last one, was trying to sell Air India, the official airline. It is just that they're not able to find a buyer. It is so much in debt. So the Indian Railways has now started running 2 private trains. As you know, it is the largest network of transportation in Asia, and the largest employer by the government. But that is also on the way to privatization. So the trend is the present budget says that the banks will be sold. So as private players are entering the market, the government system is weakening, and that is not good news for the poor people. For example, in the Indian trains, there was a general class. Now anybody could go and buy a ticket and can sit in that and travel, without any reservation in advance, without booking a seat in advance. Now, after the corona pandemic, due to lockdown, when the transportation services were held up, and when they restarted, now the general class is gone. I mean, you need a booking even to travel in the general class. And if you can't get a ticket in the general class of the railway, then you have to travel by bus, which is 3 times costlier. Even the government bus services are 3 times costlier than the railways. So the common person is affected. Now, if a common person has to travel, they either need to book a seat in the railways in advance, unlike as it was before the lockdown, or they have to travel by paying higher amount in buses. So this is what is going to happen with the farming sector also. As the private players will enter the market, the government procurement system, the Agricultural Produce Marketing Committee and their centers, and the support for minimum support price will weaken, may disappear one day, and then the farmer will be totally at the mercy of the private players. So this is the argument.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Dr. Sandeep. Then we move. Yeah, we have 2 attendees, participants who are raising their hands. So I will allow them to speak if it's possible. Is that okay for the technical team that we allow these 2 people to speak? And then I will close the open forum. I have Gershom and Sulhas.
Please unmute Suhas.
Yeah.
Hello. Thank you. I'm Suhas from National Alliance of People's Movement. Even though the question was answered and therefore not discussed here, I would like to add to that answer. The argument about farmers not ready to discuss the details of the laws, it has been pushed all the time. But the point is the very intention of these farm laws is flawed. So there is no point in going into the details of the intricacies in the drafting of the law. The very intention is questionable, and which Dr. Sandeep Pandey has elaborated with various things. So that should be added. Thank you.
Thank you, Suhas. Thank you for the addition. Can I have Gershon now to speak? Gershon, you have to unmute yourself too.
Hello, Gershon. You can unmute yourself now.
Anyway, Gershon says the presentations were very good so far. So he's very happy with this session. So I will close the forum because we are running out of time. And I still have solidarity messages. Can we share those solidarity messages from other regions? Are we ready for that?
Hello, I am there to conclude.
There, this is Rodrigo Machado Moreira. I'm from Brazil, People's Coalition for Food Sovereignty Latin America, and Instituto Giramundo Mutuando, Botucatu, São Paulo, Brazil. This is a message for solidarity with farmers in India. Stand with farmers, uphold democracy, no to junta.
I'm the Africa coordinator for People's Coalition on Food Sovereignty, PCFS. At the same time, I'm the national coordinator for Zambia Social Forum, ZAMSOF in short. This week is the India Global Action Against Farmers' Rights, which we are calling upon the of the India to repeal the 3 acts which has come about as a result of neoliberalism policies in the agriculture sector. So we are standing with the farmers in India to ensure that the Republic of the Government of India has repealed the 3 acts which is infringing the rights of the farmers in India. So this is a way of solidarity from Africa, Zambia. We stand with the farmers in India. Solidarity.
Thank you. Thank you, Gershon, and our friend from Brazil. I think now we will, and Sandeep, I hope that your colleagues are
No, I have to immediately leave 30 kilometers away, the police station where they have held up my activist colleague now.
Okay. All the best for you.
Thank you.
And solidarity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyway, we will now call upon Chania Pogri from, he's the chairperson of the Asian Peasants Coalition. And we have, he'll be, and also the executive committee member of PCFS, and well known to all of us in the struggle for farmers' rights and agricultural workers' rights. He is going to give us a glimpse of the future of farmers' protests. And he's a peasant activist and social leader. He's well known for his contribution in building farmers' movements in Andhra Pradesh, in India, and in Asia. He's also the, as I mentioned, chairperson of APC. Chania, please go ahead.
Thank you, Saru, and thanks a lot for all the panelists for their very analytical and very decent presentations exposing the kind of repressive mechanisms that the government of India is trying to push on the heads of the farming community. So it is in that context, there are so many ways people have been looking this farmers movement. How is it going to continue? People say that only physical presence can only a kind of way to show, and then they show the strength of the farmers. But in reality, every farming community member in the villages are disturbed. It is not just by these three legislations. We all should understand that it is an opportunity. These three laws are given the opportunity for the farming communities to expose the kind of exploitation that has been taking place in the country against the agrarian economy, and more so on the farmers and workers who depend on their livelihood. Despite of the so-called urbanization has been increasing for decades, even today, the data surveys reveals that 63% of the population in the country are depending on the agrarian economy, and the government wanted to see that this agrarian economy should be handed over to the corporate lobby, and so that these people are drive away from the agriculture, and the corporates can come easily into the kind of arena to loot whatever the meager resources that are there in nature, and also with the agriculture communities. So the agony of the farmers, which they have been facing due to the so-called development packages that the government has been introduced from time to time, has been made the farming communities more vulnerable, and they become the tools for exploitation, and they became the victims of these exploitations. And that is the one which has been resulted in this form today, and they have been sustained, and it cannot be stopped in this manner, because even if the government today withdraws the legislations, the struggle will not end, because there is decades of agony against the way that the government has been building the economy as against the rural economy. In India, we say Bharat is struggling against the India. That means the rural India has been disturbed so badly in the country, and it has been disturbed by the way that the policies has been always support to the upper middle class and then rich communities in the urban centers, and the entire budget, if you see the country over the last 40 years, it has been only pouring the money in the increase of the urbanization and then decrease the rural dependency kind of thing. So it is in this context, the struggle will continue. Struggle will continue in different forms, if not in the same form. And farmers will not leave there, and agrarian communities, which has been disturbed so badly, will not leave, because it's not only just by these farm laws and various means, either by, you see, the taken away our forests, mines are entered into the forest area, disturb the Adivasis, and even these three laws have been undermined. Many legislations that are progressive legislations that are being given to the people after their long struggle, they have not been taken into consideration. And then capital intensive agriculture has been really a focus in the government, and all the subsidies that has been given all these days and years in the green revolution package, it has been helped the industrial sector, not the real genuine poor farmers in the villages. It's only all these things today. The farmers are not just only asking the government to stop this. It is a real war against the neoliberal policies of the government. In different ways they have been manifested, and then they have been now demanding, and the struggles has been coming out very concretely and very constructive way of demands. Like, you give us the warehouses. Why do you give the warehouses to the FCA, the private industries? You build the warehouses in the villages under the Gram Sabhas. That is the lowest democratic institutional system still survive despite of its bad practices. It survived in the rural India, where they can really control the leadership and people can participate in that. Build the cold storages in the villages, and then you see that the technologies which are to be contributing to the workers, not displacing in the name of the development, displacing the workers mercilessly, should not be introduced. All these things the government has to listen to this farming community, otherwise they will be defeated. And they have already tasted the benefit of this struggle, because the BJP utter failure to get the votes in Panchayat elections in Punjab, which just has happened 15 days back. So that itself is an indication that a strongest hold in the northern belt has been losing its roots in North India, and anyway they don't have much in South India. They were trying to do something, but it doesn't help them to go. So the struggle is not only against the neoliberal policies, and it is also a struggle against the present government, and any government which supports the corporate agriculture will be definitely defeated by the people. And it is against the monopoly capitalism, and also it is monopoly capitalism which pushed the governments in favor of the corporate sector and against the agrarian economy. So it is in that context these people will not leave it, and the struggles has been manifested in different ways, and the struggles will continue to go to restore the rights of the farmers and farming communities, and as against the present regime, and also their plans to really take over the whatever the meager resources that has been there with the farmers. And there are different groups has been already expressing their solidarity, and has been extended solidarity ever since the independence. This is the first time the labor, both formal and informal, in solidarity with the farmer struggles. It never been like that. So the formal informal workers continuously supported all through the time, all these 85 or 86 days in support of the farmer struggle. And though the people have been gathered in Delhi, because it is a proximity, is close by for 3-4 states, but the farmers in South cannot travel by 2 nights and 2 days, cannot afford to even travel to such a long to show solidarity, but they have been continuing their struggles in their own areas, showing their solidarity. This will not end by that. It will definitely show the results in the upcoming elections, how the farmers are affected and how the farmers are teaching the lessons. And we hope that all the solidarities that has been extended by our friends cutting across the borders is a great support, and really it is these kind of solidarities help the farmers to really continue the struggles. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chinaya. That was very inspiring and hopeful. And the struggle goes on, and life is a struggle, and we will continue to struggle together in solidarity, and stand with farmers all over, particularly in India right now. So thank you very much for that. So for the closing remarks, we have Azra Said, a feminist, a land rights advocate, and a social leader. Azra is known for her contributions in building peasant movements in Pakistan and in Asia. She currently holds positions in the international organizations, including the CSM-CFS, which is the civil society mechanism in the Committee on Food Security. APRN, she's the chair of the Asia Pacific Research Network. IWA, which is the International Women's Association, and she's the vice chair of ILPS. So Azra, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Saro, so much. I'm sorry for giving you such a mouthful. I'm first and foremost an activist and out there with the people, standing with the people. So, thank you very much, Dr. Narisma, Dr. Reddy, and Comrade Sandeep, and of course, Chinaya, whom we hold very, very dear. Listening to all of you was, in a way, very tragic, because before 47, we were one. And the situations that you were narrating was like you were talking about Pakistan. There was not a single point of difference when Professor Sandeep talked about jute bags, we call them bardana here in Pakistan, and it's exactly the same for us, that the jute bags are not available for the small farmers, for the landless farmers, to get a higher price. And we have already approved an act for electronic marketing. So everything is exactly the same. I think what is shocking is that in 1995, when the WTO was being created, our hopes were on India, the state of India. We had felt that for everything which we had to fight in our countries, India's government used to stand there and fight for the people of India, but at the same time, fighting for the people of all the third world countries who were saying no to the neoliberalism. And that has changed radically. Today, what I learned was that the government in India is pushing for a centralized control, same as in Pakistan. That is the key word. They really want the control to be taken away from the states. So the little bit of democracy which is there in our countries is going to go directly to the federal government. And then the power is now being handed over to the corporate sector. So I will not put any more time into repeating what has been said about India, but just say that it is not only India, it is a blueprint which they have used across the third world countries, whether it is Africa or Asia or Latin America. So if they can use a blueprint, we can also use a blueprint. And we are many more. You know, I learned that the Mughal dynasty in India controlled the entire people through 1,000 the elite services, 1,000 people to control the entire of India. And then Indian civil service from the British, also just 1,000 people to control the entire subcontinent of more than 300,000 people, 3 million, I think. I get 3 lakhs. So we have learned this. This is nothing new. For us, the learning has to go forward into practice. What we have learned is to unite. If they can do it with 1,000 people, we are many, many billions. We are in billions. Across the globe, we are in billions. And now, there are even people standing up with us in Europe, in the Americas. People who used to always stand with the elite are now standing with us. And we are growing across all continents, across the world. And we are fighting a very major brute force of monopoly capital. That is fine. But we are more, and we are more intelligent, and we are more diverse. So we have many ideas, and we have many ways of fighting. We are never, never, never intimidated by whatever they want to do. Can you see Mr. Comrade Sandeep sitting there casually on the phone trying to get his people up? Yes, we do this. We do multiple things at the same time. And we have the ability and the creativity and the strength and the unity to go forward. We are never alone. We are never, never, never afraid. And so no matter what they think they can put up for us and they can defeat us, no, they cannot. They cannot. And that is the belief I have. And that is the belief that has kept humanity alive over millions and millions of years, and we will continue. It is our food they want. It is our land they want. It is our seeds they want. It is our people they want. And now they have created bloody automation. It does not matter. The automation is also serviced by people. So our challenge is to turn around the minds of our people, is to bring them out of colonization, is to bring them out of that bondage which the bloody corporates and our governments have created around us. And it is a very big task. It's not a small task. But we are far beyond them, and we have the capacity to do it. It only takes constant vigilance and constant eye on the goals that we are looking for, and we will win. So the 3 Farm Acts of India are actually very much the blueprint of the WTO, are very much the blueprint of the corporate Americas, of the colonial United Kingdom. It's nothing new. And we have fought all of these over and over again. We just need to sit down and create another work plan, a very simple work plan to figure out how can we unite our people across our villages, across our towns, across our districts, across our nations, and the corporate sector has given us the tool to do it. We have the Zoom and we have GoToMeeting and God knows what not. So we have so much. So even if the COVID has been very destructive to our people, and we have seen the extremely wretched hand of the corporates and how they have amassed these vaccines in the countries, leaving the third world out, we know this is what they will do. They don't care if we die. They will be happy if we die of hunger and this famine because there will be less of us. So we know that they are not going to take care of us. It is for us. So my last message, and the only message, is let us unite. Let us get over this fascist concepts of religion. They divide and rule policy. Religion, one. Then the corporate sector, of course, the class divide, the nationalism divide, and above and all, the hate divide. Just hate somebody else all the time for no matter what reason. We need to get over that. We need to figure out the differences that they create through fascism and through corporate control, and know that we are one. Our religions don't matter. Our faces, the color of our skins don't matter. Our nationalities, our gender does not matter. What matters is that we are against class divide, and we will fight them against whatever they want to control to have an equitable, classless society. And we will not stop till we have that. So thank you very much. Thank you very, very much for this great seminar.
Thank you, Azra. That was also very inspiring, I must say. I like, and let's support each other, and we will be victorious. Anyway, so I would like to end this. I just have one small announcement. Don't go away. We want to take a photo. The second announcement is that ILPS has a statement to repeal the 3 farm laws, and it's please sign on. All of us are signing on to that statement, and it's on the ILPS website. And maybe for PCFS, we can also share this among the participants here for you to sign on. So yeah, please do that. And then finally, we would like to have you all switch on the your video so that we can take a photo. And we want to say, while we take the photo, we want to say, stand with Indian farmers. Long live international solidarity. We stand with Indian farmers. Long live
international solidarity.
Thank you. Shall we do it again? Because
yes.
all the mics
yes.
are on.
Yes.
1, 2, 3. We stand with farmers. Long live international solidarity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Click on our video so we can take a photo.
Okay. Okay, everyone, I'm taking the photos now. If you have calls, please bring them out. All right, 1, 2, and 3. Another 1, 1, 2, and 3. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, Wali.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Very long seminar. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Saro, so much.
Ladenge, jitenge. That's the slogan we all have in India.
Ladenge, jitenge. Ladenge,
Right.
jitenge.
We'll fight and we shall win.
Okay. Wonderful. Bye, everyone.
Hi, Chinaya.
Hi.
How are you?
Fine. Yeah. Thanks.
Oh, it's Nimal.
Yeah.
After a long time.
Yes. While he was there, I couldn't contact him. I saw you and put a comment. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Saro. Thank you, China. Okay, right. Yeah.
Thank you, Chinaya. Thank you, Nimal.
Yeah,
See you again.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks, sir. Thanks for participating, DNR sir, and also to Narasimha Reddy garu.
Hello, everyone. We will just schedule for an assessment with APC, with the co-organizers, APC, ILPS Com6, ILPS International, Pan Asia Pacific, and APBVU. And also, of course, I think CNS. So we will just do a doodle poll, I guess, for the assessment later on. Thank you very much to everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Saro.